And join us now for a closer look at President Trump's message in Davos. Jason Miller, who served as senior advisor on President Trump's transition team and election campaigns. I'm not sure about the linkage of bringing you on after playing that. We didn't play it all morning, but we played it for you. But welcome. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.
We were just talking off camera about the president coming here. You had something to do with the, I guess, organizing such a big turnout of administration for Scott Bessent, Howard Lutnick, the president himself. Has it been a good experience for the president? You said something about someone might like a world stage, I guess.
As we know, President Trump loves the world stage, and I think the reception that he received here at Davos was really quite overwhelming. And even yesterday when he was delivering his remarks, I think a lot of folks expected him to come in and talk about Greenland, but they didn't expect to hear such a clear, concise case of why the U.S. should own Greenland. And everywhere we went, there were administration people all over the place. As you mentioned, Secretary Bessent, Secretary Lutnick. In fact, I bumped into a gal that works at the WEF who's been with the organization for years, said she's never seen an administration have this large of a contingent at Davos. And the reason why? America has a great story to tell. President Trump has a great story to tell. Everywhere you saw Americans, you saw optimism this week. Except for Gavin Newsom, but you can't help him.
You can't help him. You were in the room, I guess, during the speech, and I guess people were listening quite intently to the president at that point. Own the room?
They were, and that's the thing that...
It was uncomfortable things to hear for a lot of Europeans.
But I think that's a big part of the reason why people respect him so much, is that he's going to come in and tell you exactly what he thinks. By the way, you can also follow him on True Social and find out exactly what he thinks, as you guys do and react to almost every day. But I think Europe needed to hear that. And one of the things that, this is my first trip to Davos, learning is that the sense of optimism that you have with the U.S., with Americans, not necessarily shared by the Europeans. And almost all the Europeans I met with or spoke with seem to be pessimistic or seem to be dour. I could see why they'd be frustrated with the EU and the overregulation. But Americans believe the country is back, the economy is back, and we're taking off like a rocket ship.
We don't talk about the overregulation. We haven't in a couple of years. Starting a beer company in Greece, if you try, it's basically impossible to break through in a lot of entrepreneurial endeavors all across Europe. And I think the GDP numbers for the last 20 years speak exactly to that. I'd be in a bad mood too, I think.
Well, and I think that's a big part of the reason why so many people want to invest in the U.S. And you see the stock market taking off this first couple of weeks here and even at the end of last year. The optimism is in the U.S. The investment is going into the U.S. And I imagine coming out of this, you'll probably hear some more deals about folks investing in the U.S. as well.
Let me ask you a question just about maybe process. Maybe not even the outcome. I think a lot of the outcomes, obviously the outcome yesterday between NATO and the United States over Greenland is a positive outcome. But there's a process question, and I think even if you talk to a lot of the most influential, biggest name CEOs in America, they are conflicted at best about how we get there. And in part think actually that long term it could damage the underlying relationship and trust between European nations, European companies. I've heard some of them privately even complain about just how much of the conversation is actually about that, and what you think that ultimately looks like long term.
Yeah, really good question, particularly for the markets as people are watching this. I think the Europeans needed to hear this message from President Trump. And unless they heard it from him here in Davos in very plain, straightforward, easy to understand way, they're never going to have the courage to make any of these reforms. At the current path, whether it be on the population, whether it be on the economic trends, Europe's heading in the wrong direction. You look at the United States and what we're doing, it's a great place to go and put your money and invest. But President Trump came in, someone had to tell the Europeans what's going on.
There's an undercurrent of when Brigitte Bardot died, the one thing they talked about, she was controversial because early on she said Paris is changing, France is changing, the immigration policies of Europe are changing these countries. And I think they had to sit there and listen to the president berate them yesterday on cities that are unrecognizable from where they were 20 years ago.
Yeah, Andrew, I want to go back to a point you were making also just about the process aspect of this. President Trump realizes he has 3 more years in office, unless I can convince him to run again in 2028.
You're kidding.
That's a joke. That's a joke.
Yeah. Don't say that around here.
If you do all the first 3 campaigns, you'd have to stick around for the 4th. But President Trump knows he has a finite amount of time to get the U.S. on track, but also to get our allies on track. We see what he's done with getting NATO increase the spending that they're going with, because we don't know who's going to be next. I obviously hope it'll be Vice President Vance, but there are no certainties in life. We have to get it done now.
What did you make of what Mark Carney's speech? Because there was a lot of people talking about that in terms of sort of a new world order, the idea that some of these countries ultimately that have been allies of the U.S. may be allies in some ways, but may have to find new friends, including friends like China, which is something that I don't think we ever wanted to push people into the arms of.
It occurred to you that sucking up and partnering up with a repressive communist regime is just that does not compute for a Western nation like Canada.
It may not, but by the way, they're going to have BYD vehicles in Canada, and they're going to be on our doorstep.
I wouldn't put it past Mark Carney to think that China is a better partner than the United States, but I don't admire someone that would come to that conclusion.
I'm not doing that.
He's clearly playing to his political base.
Yeah,
and that's a
a
nonsensical statement to say that Canada might look to partner up with China. And to your point, Joe, if that's where Carney wants to go, then more power to him. The fact is, Canada should be a good ally of the United States and vice versa. But also, the United States can't be expected to cover everything for Canada or to be taken advantage of with trade deals. And so I think the president's right to push him. And look, Carney needs to come around, tune in. We have limited amount of time to fix not just
Western
the country.
Canada for the Uyghur, reprocessing camps, a lot of room out there. That might be a great place. Let's see if Mark would
I'm not suggesting this is the right path. I'm suggesting that the fact that Western countries even talking about that aloud.
Well, if he's talking about it aloud, it's his problem. That's my point.
And we're going to see. Do you think there's a way to repair the relationship with Canada?
Well, of course. There's always a way to repair the relationship. But President Trump knows he's going to get the deal done first before he can get better terms, before we probably get to that point. But Carney needs to get on board.
And one last thing about the Supreme Court and tariffs. The president has used these tariffs through executive order very effectively. There is a possibility that the Supreme Court will say that he can't use these tariffs the same way in the future. Not to say that he can't use tariffs at all, but this mechanism could change. And the question is, if this mechanism changes, what kind? I mean, he's used these as sort of a chess piece in terms of leverage with all of these other countries over so many different issues. And how you think that dynamic shifts if, in fact, he doesn't have them in the same way.
So I'm not a lawyer, definitely not a trade lawyer, so I can't speak to necessarily the Supreme Court specifics. But the smart lawyers that I speak with, including Jameson Greer, our fantastic trade rep, feel very confident about how things will turn out with the Supreme Court. And there are all sorts of mechanisms that President Trump can use. And that's one of the transformative things that he's done with his presidency is use the ultimate soft power, which is trade. It used to be power would only be if you move a battleship or an aircraft carrier off the coast. Now you can use trade to move things, saving lives.